Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. We're going to get started here in a few minutes, so if you can get signed in and settled in, we'll get going here. Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Appreciate everyone coming to this conversation on the zoning code update for the city of Elyria. So my name is Chris Schoenig. I am the city planner for Elyria. Right beside me is Dawn Calvert. She is the Assistant Safety Service Director, focuses on economic development. You also have Daryl Farkas, who is the Chief Building Official. And finally, Mark Craig here. He is the Administrative Legal Counsel. Out in the back is Ashley Scott, Community Development Director. So that's our little brief introduction here, and we'll get right into it. In fact, let me lower the, and Daryl's got it, okay. So our meeting agenda tonight, we're gonna go over the basics of zoning. We're gonna go through the new zoning code, go through some of the categories. We'll include some of the uses that are applicable to these new zoning categories that we are proposing. A little timeline of what we're looking at right now for the project. And we're going to have a question and answer session for everyone to take part in. We also, as you saw, we have some maps available to all of you for the existing as well as the proposed zoning code. And when this meeting is when the slides are completed, we can go through, if any of you are interested in it, You look up your address, look at what your existing zoning is, and compare that to your proposed zoning. That sounds good to everyone. We're going to move forward here, cover the zoning basics, or the basics of zoning. What is zoning? Zoning is government rules that impose limits on how a landowner may develop and use their property. These regulations restrict features such as building height, size, architectural design, sometimes windows, signage, fencing, and landscaping. Zoning maps, as you can see at the front of the room and the back, those provide the locations of each of these zones, and each zone has unique restrictions. Residential will differ from an industrial versus a commercial. So there is some benefits to zoning. It does protect property values, separates residential uses from industrial and commercial zones, preserves neighborhood character, ensures public health and safety, regulates setbacks, building heights, previously mentioned. It does promote efficient growth, prevents haphazard land use. You don't have industrial, residential, industrial, something like that. It provides some consistency across the board. Provides amenities, designates areas for parks, schools, services, some of our institutional uses, as we would call them, and ensures community access to these parks, schools, as well as police, fire, so on and so forth. It does facilitate community input, offers opportunities for public participation in development decisions. If an individual proposes a rezoning of their property, individuals are provided mailouts. It was usually published in, for example, the Chronicle Telegram, and people are informed of that process as well. So some of you have heard of zoning code, building code. Some people may think those are the same. They are different from the other. Zoning code focuses on what can be built. Building code focuses on how it is built. Emphasis for zoning code includes a land use focus. It mainly is concerned with permitted uses of a property. Different areas within the city, of course, can have those zoning requirements, classifications. Like I said, residential areas versus an industrial park, they will have different requirements. And of course, those limits of building height as well are applied. Building code, that deals with a little more detail here as in terms of sprinkler systems, fire equipment that are contained within a building, wiring, fire safety, as I stated, and structural integrity of the building, making sure that if a building needs a firewall, that it meets standards set forth by the state of Ohio. Safety focus aims to protect public health and safety. These two are similar. Zoning does, to a degree, try to ensure separation of uses, like I said, for zoning and residential. But that is also applicable for the building code. Like I said, load-bearing walls, minimum stair tread depth, and proper ventilation systems are some of those examples that can be found in the building code. So the zoning change request process, we previously mentioned if a property owner wishes to rezone their property, there is a process behind that. There is an application actually in the back of the room that is our current one. That process involves an applicant, property owner that will come to us, submit the form. A staff report is created. Mailouts are provided to neighboring parcels, neighboring property owners rather, and it is advertised in local media. This is sent to our Planning Commission, which does provide, let me step back here quickly here, but the staff report provided by planning provides a recommendation of approval or disapproval based on consistency with the zoning code. That is forwarded to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission will vote on it. They provide a recommendation to City Council, who has the final say in the matter of approval or disapproval of the rezoning of the property. So we have a brief informational video here for all of you to watch. I believe it's about 5 minutes, and we will watch this briefly and move on from there.
City's grown and developed thanks to a little known and sometimes...
Sorry about that. Don't want to blow anyone's eardrum out here. I'm sorry.
...as arcane set of...
Still need to go down a little bit.
rules and regulations known as the zoning code. Zoning influences U.S. cities grow and develop thanks to a little-known and sometimes arcane set of rules and regulations known as the zoning code. Zoning influences everything from building heights to signage. Understanding the zoning code is key to understanding U.S. cities and how to influence them for the better. In this video, I'm going to go over the basics of zoning. I'm going to describe the pros and cons of zoning. And finally, I'm going to tell you how you can influence the zoning code in your community to make them more walkable, bikeable, and equitable.
So let's start with zoning basics. The zoning code consists of two basic parts, the map and the regulations. Let's start with the map. If you've ever played a SimCity game, you have an idea of how a zoning map works. Every parcel in a city is placed in a zoning district that specifies the types of uses allowed. Now, every city can create their own zoning districts, but they all generally have the same basic types of districts. They are residential, from single-family homes to high-rise apartments in yellow, commercial, including retail, restaurants, and hotels, colored red, industrial, in gray, though some maps will show them in purple, institutional, which means schools and public buildings, typically in blue, and open space in green appropriately. Here's an example of a zoning map. You can see that most of the city is residential in yellow, there's a large industrial section in the northeast, and a few areas of commercial in red. Now zoning maps can get a lot more complicated than just 5 colors. Now in this example map here, you can see all of the colors just mentioned, with the addition of an orangish color for multifamily residential. It's common for zoning districts to separate not only uses, but intensity of uses. You'll often see C1, C2, and C3 zones, where the increasing number means it allows increasing levels of commercial density. In addition, you may also see overlay zones. These zones, as the name implies, lays over the top of other zones and adds additional restrictions and regulations within them. Okay, so that's the map. It assigns every parcel to a district that has its own set of rules regarding use and intensity. Next up are the regulations themselves. Now, this is where zoning gets its reputation for being so boring. There's no video game that simulates the writing of a zoning code, but it's where all of the important stuff is located, so let's dive in and make some sense out of it. The zoning code, or ordinance, contains sections for each of the zones found in the map. Within these sections, there's typically a use table. This table lists all of the permitted uses within each zone. For example, a use table for a commercial zone may have a bakery as an allowed use, but an auto salvage yard is not an allowed use. Many use tables also classify some uses as conditional uses or special uses. These uses aren't allowed outright, but require some consultation and approval from the city government first. It's more of a case-by-case basis situation. After the use table comes the basic development requirements. This means standards for things like building setbacks and side yards, minimum lot sizes, and building heights. Every city has different requirements for their zoning districts. After the use tables and development requirements for each zoning district, most zoning codes will contain impact regulations, or regulations that are not specific to any one zoning district. These often include regulations for signage, parking standards, historic preservation standards, and urban design criteria.
So that's a really quick overview of the zoning code. At this point, you may be thinking to yourself, that all sounds really reasonable. And you know what? You're right, it is reasonable. And that's one of the benefits of zoning. Zoning tries its best to ensure that new development is built in a way that's predictable, reasonable, and minimizes impact to adjacent property owners. It's why city leaders installed zoning codes in many cities over 100 years ago. Zoning ensures that an oil refinery can't be built adjacent to a neighborhood of single-family homes. I think we can all agree that's a pretty worthwhile goal.
Increasingly, however, planners, civic leaders, and community members have begun to question the practice of zoning. For all of its positive aspects, there are quite a few negative qualities too, and I'll list a couple of the biggest ones. First, communities can use zoning codes as a tool of exclusion. Historically, this happened explicitly. Cities would literally write zoning codes that excluded people from districts based on skin color or ethnicity. Now, these were clearly unconstitutional and eventually removed, but these explicit codes gave way to implicit ones that many communities still use today. The most common way to exclude people using the zoning code is by imposing large minimum lot size requirements and other regulations that increase the cost of building a home. If new homes must be built on 1-acre lots or larger, for example, only large expensive homes will be built. This allows cities to become enclaves for the rich at the expense of low and moderate income families. The second major criticism comes from the segregation of uses that I described as a positive before. Segregating uses can also lead to sterile environments and force citizens to travel large distances between different zones for trips to work, school, shopping, and home. Many communities have introduced mixed-use zones that allow for a mixture of residential and commercial uses to mitigate this problem, though mixed-use zones are typically not widespread across zoning maps. Alternatives to traditional single-use zoning, such as form-based codes, aim to reform zoning and move away from the segregation paradigm. Form-based codes regulate the size and shape of buildings instead of their use. So that's zoning in a nutshell. Potentially useful, but probably could be better. How do you make zoning work better in your community? The first step, go to your city's website and find the page for their planning department, sometimes known as the Community Development Department. In most cities, they will post upcoming meetings and town halls. You may get lucky and your community is in the midst of a zoning code revision. These happen rarely, but when they do, it is an excellent opportunity to make your voice heard. You can attend a meeting and give your opinion, send it in to a planning staff or elected official, or write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper. You can tell them to include more mixed-use zones that allow for vibrant, walkable places. If your community isn't going through a zoning code revision, and that's probably the case, you can do many of the same things, but instead you must make a case that the zoning code is in need of a refresh. Your elected officials may not be aware that their zoning code could be better. You could be starting a much-needed conversation in your city.
The bottom line is that if you want great cities, you need a zoning code that makes it perfectly easy and legal to build great development projects.
So luckily that's the case here. We're in the middle of a zoning rewrite, so it's very helpful that all of your input is considered with this moving forward. So, let me back to the presentation. Okay, so now we're going to cover some of the aspects of the new zoning code. Going to do a brief summary where this came from, a little bit of information on the protocol, and so forth. So our new zoning code came from a comprehensive plan that was approved in 2024, last year, that provided recommendations. We worked with a consultant closely for a couple of years, I believe it was, to cover various aspects of the city as is. Some of the information that was provided was median age, income level, racial makeup of the community, housing, transportation, parking, amongst others. Some of the trends noticed was the city does have an aging population, less children in this community, and smaller households are in place, meaning, years ago maybe average household was four people. Maybe we're down to, I believe it's 2.5 in the current one. But this component did include public engagement, included public meetings, discussion to determine citizen needs. Some of the ideas expressed by Illyrians included improved dining options, improved options for transportation, improved roadway network, and improved public safety. Part of the component of this as well was the desire to create a new zoning code to update some of our requirements, such as uses, that may not have existed when this was updated last in 1998. So last time this zoning code was updated was 1998. So our rewriting protocol. So some of the things that we're going to be doing here with this rewrite is redefining our terms, including new land use terms that have not been included in the previous rewrite. That includes breweries and Airbnbs, just to name a couple. We're updating our procedures. We had a discussion here on a few slides ago regarding how we do rezonings in the community. So we're looking to streamline some of our processes as well and making it a little more easier for people to understand. Adding illustrations to improve the comprehension of our code language. Public adoption hearings, those will be available to everyone moving forward as well. And the new zoning code will be adopted at a later time this year. So our current code versus our new code, we are reducing from 18 zoning districts down to 8, around 8. Reducing zoning categories can assist in attracting more local business, promoting development in a community if you have less restrictions for uses that are relevant to, let's say, a commercial district where, a brewery might not be allowed, microbrewery. It's not in our current code, may allow for that moving forward. Implementing modern uses, as I said, esports centers, Airbnbs, amongst others to the code. These uses are clearly not defined in our existing code. So what this will do and what it will not do is this will allow greater flexibility in uses, reduce government red tape, lessen the need for rezoning of properties in the city, but it will not impact most of you. If you have a residential home in the community, you will most likely, not in all cases, but most likely will have a residential zoning moving forward. For you to change the existing use of your property and conform to the new zoning requirements, that is not the case either here. You will not have to change the existing use of your property. So non-conforming uses. That is a property that, with the rewrites, that may exist, meaning that your property no longer conforms with the standards of the zoning code. So moving forward, these uses will be allowed if it is existing on the property, may continue to operate as long as they do not cease operation for more than 6 months, and no additional non-conforming uses are created. Non-conforming structures, if you want to have a reconstruction of part of your property, if it is repaired or reconstructed in the same manner, that would be allowed as well. However, changing the size, the footprint of the structure would lose its non-conforming status. Parking requirements are also considered in this rewrite across the country. Many cities have begun to eliminate or reduce the need for parking requirements. Our current zoning code does require a minimum of off-street parking for each use that we do have in our code. The proposed zoning code will eliminate parking minimums in several of our zoning categories as proposed, but we are currently working with our consultant to direct them as to how we would like to see this moving forward. But benefits for eliminating parking minimums may include improved walkability for the community, less dependence on cars, better utilization of land, and lower home prices. So just a basic summary here is this draft is in progress. This has not been forwarded to Planning Commission yet or City Council. This is in the draft phase, and your public input is very much appreciated. No final decisions have been made, of course. Purposes of this meeting is to provide you with the opportunity to have your voice heard, and as stated too, that most neighborhoods will retain their existing characteristics. So we're going to go through about, I think there's eight zoning categories here. We're going to go through what each one will entail, and then some of the uses that will fall under the umbrella of each of these categories. This is a brief summary of each of these. Available at the front of the room is a new zoning code for any of you that wish to have it. It is also available on the City Planning webpage. If you just look up City Planning Elyria, you should be able to find it. And of course, I will be sending out an email to all of you to direct you to the page as well. So a residential one is our first category. It is yellow on our zoning map. This district intends to preserve character of existing low-density neighborhoods. These units may be appealing to senior citizens, smaller families. These areas were built traditionally from 1960s forward in the city. They usually have a cul-de-sac. They have larger setbacks from the road, wider lots. That's what's included here. But some of the uses that are include 1-unit residential, 2 units, 3 to 8 unit residential, townhomes, mobile home parks. Daycares will be permitted, 7 to 12 children, as well as type B daycares as designated by the state. Community gardens, as well as playgrounds and parks. So our residential 2 category here is tan, or a sort of a burnt yellow, dark yellow on the map. This district intends to promote a broad diversity of housing types, along with compact, walkable neighborhoods. You can think areas south of the downtown area here in Elyria, west by the river, areas east of downtown as well, where you have more of a grid-type pattern of development of houses. No cul-de-sacs are included in these areas. Small-scale commercial properties are usually at the end of the streets, such as coffee shops, neighborhood grocery stores, small mom-and-pop shops. Development should feature architectural styles that complement the existing neighborhood, usually, like I stated, they're in historic districts. And sidewalk and bicycle connectivity is imperative to these areas as well. Some examples include 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 to 8 unit residential, townhomes, residential care housing, daycares, community gardens, as well as playgrounds and parks. The downtown district is from about 5th Street up to the river. This is dark purple on the zoning map. This intends to embody the heart of Elyria with a mix of uses, including businesses, restaurants, bakeries, coffee shops. Public spaces are available. Ellie Square, such as in front of City Hall here. Downtown District is from 5th to the river. But also you can think of areas such as Medina, Vermilion. That's the type of uses that we're looking for in downtown Elyria. Oberlin as well, just a mix of commercial, different dining options, sort of reflecting on our comprehensive plan. We want to see some more dining options in the downtown area. So uses, we're covering a broad range of residential uses as well. 9+ residential is included as well, apartment complexes, daycare facilities, offices, which are included under indoor sale and service, special events venues, small indoor drinking and entertainment venues as well, large scale, 20 or more occupants, rec centers. It's a very broad, diverse range of uses that are permitted. But no industrial, of course. Our corridor district, this is sort of reflecting back on our video there, a mixed-use district it's intended as. This is usually along Cleveland Street, many of your arterial roadways in Elyria, Broad Street, West River Road, and near significant intersections. This is pink or purplish on our zoning map as well. It advocates for buildings to be placed near the sidewalk, lesser setbacks, as opposed to residential, where you have 20, 30 feet away from the roadway. This is meant to be right up on the sidewalk to allow easier walkability for residents. Encourage densities that support transit access and improve the mobility of citizens in Elyria. So some of our examples of uses, most residential, including 9+ residential, which is our apartment complexes, libraries, museums, playhouses, and schools, daycare facilities, rec centers, community gardens, very, very similar to the downtown district in some of the uses that we're permitting. Commercial district, these areas are predominantly, you can think around Midway Mall, Chestnut Commons, little more focused on car access, less on biking and walking, but includes mostly businesses, services, employers. Usually they're oriented towards highways or major arterial roadways, and while some uses may be accessed primarily by vehicles, we still do want some access for pedestrians and bicyclists. These uses are very similar to corridor, with most of the residential removed here, animal shelters, daycare facilities. You can think of a lot of office spaces for doctors and indoor special events venues, outdoor sales, playground, parks, tow yards, libraries, and such. Industrial, this is gray on the zoning map. This district intends for large employment centers. You think of a lot of the areas along Taylor Street, western part of the city as well. Development should be connected by walking and biking amenities as well. And this is maintaining our existing corridors for industrial in the city. Usually it's near railroad corridors as well. This includes storage of commercial equipment or vehicles, principal solar energy and wind energy systems. This, of course, was not written in the last code in 1998, so we want to include some modern uses here. Large industrial, heavy industrial facilities. Currently, we have light, heavy, and special industrial districts. We currently have 3 just for industrial, so we're narrowing this down into 1 district. Some of the very heavy industrial uses, such as junkyards, any sort of mineral processing facilities, that will need to go through a review process by the city to ensure compliance. So we are working with, we're directing our consultant to include some of that language with the next update to this zoning code draft. Our final district here is the Parks and Open Space District. This is green in our zoning map. This includes areas with parks, of course, small businesses, but we want to provide connections for these small businesses and schools as well in these areas. A lot of trails, and bike facilities as well. A lot of our parks within the community, you can think of Elliewood Park, Cascade Park, as long as areas concentrated in the northeastern portion of the city. So most of our uses include community gardens, playgrounds, reserves, agritourism, camping, nature retreat centers, summer camps. So in terms of our timeline here, we are looking to have a meeting with local developers as well for their input. We will be having another public meeting sometime in April. Planning Commission will be hearing this in May. They will be forwarded this document. They have been forwarded this document for March, but they will have a vote hopefully in May for this. As discussed, this is just tentative. This is what we're looking at for right now. But City Council will take a look at it. They have a committee, strategic planning. They will review this. And then there will be 3 City Council meetings as well to provide just a final say. This will be reviewed by our legal department as well. And we're hoping for adoption of this zoning code by September. So with that, I would like to open up the floor here, questions and answers that we can have and provide for you as well. And as I indicated, we do have zoning maps available in the front of the room, the back, and we also can pull this up on the screen if you are interested in how this affects your property as is right now, and moving forward, what your current zoning is and what your proposed zoning would be for your property. Okay, thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
Hello. I was wondering where you were talking about reducing parking, if you knew the specific zones.
So right now, this is, like I said, this document is not final. We are looking at maintaining parking minimums in our commercial as well as industrial districts. Requirements in residential, downtown to promote developments would be preferable to maintain no minimum there. But we have had conversation, this is not reflected in the current document, but we have had conversation with our consultant to sort of move in the direction of other communities of eliminating some parking minimums in certain districts, but maintaining them in our commercial as well as industrial.
My concern is downtown parking. If we were to lose parking downtown, oh, there's empty buildings and things, but if there were to be growth, it seems like limiting our parking might limit the opportunity for growth. That was just something I thought when you were talking. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. So I noticed when I was looking in the code, there was a lot of X's and C, you know, a different area. I wondered when there would be a more robust copy of the zoning code that's proposed available.
So we're hoping to have one in the next few weeks. We've gone through a lot of review with the consultants and provided them with a lot of comments. So we're hoping to have something within the next few weeks, hopefully a month or so. As I stated, we will be having a meeting in April. We will hopefully have a more robust document by then. I'm sure we will. But within the next few weeks, that's what I'm hoping for. We will reach out to all of you if you provided your email address as well to provide you with updates moving forward with this process so you're informed as well. And of course, I do have my business cards in the back, so if you have any questions, please reach out, contact me with any questions and concerns regarding the current version of the draft.
I was trying to follow along between the master plan into the zoning map, and I see in the master plan it's Main Street mixed use, but the language being used in the zoning is corridor. Are those synonymous?
So the Main Street mixed use would pretty much be what we're talking about with the corridor. Yeah, so Main Street, not actually Main Street, but
Right.
talking about those main arterial roadways within the city, it would translate to Cleveland Street, and Middle Ave, I believe, is zoned for corridor two.
To correspond, okay. Hold on. And so, in the Main Street mixed use corridor for the zoning, there's something called, the master plan calls it a small scale commercial as being what's recommended. And, I guess my question is, in the corridor proposed zone, would that allow a fast food restaurant to be installed or built with a drive-through? So in the corridor district, fast food restaurant be,
That is a very good question, and I will take a look into that for you. I don't want to tell you anything incorrect here.
okay.
And luckily, this is, we will have all these comments moving forward, but I do have your contact information, so I'll reach out to you and give you a better, more precise answer on that.
Great, all right, thanks so much. Or- And so I guess the concern is a corridor district with a drive-through that's directly against a residential area. No, if you can do that, that would be rough for the people living in the house right next door.
And depending on the lot size too, you may have traffic queuing concerns that are feeding into the roadway as well, I would think. So that is definitely something we can look into further for you.
About the maps, is the one on the left like the old one and the one on the right the new one? The
Yes.
proposed one?
Yes, so the one on the left is your 18 zoning districts, and then on the right, that is the simplified version that we're proposing here with a reduced down to 8 districts. And then below that one is a little description on each of those proposed zoning districts too.
It has to do with the developers you guys got coming.
No, we have several local developers that are included as well that met with us, I believe it was in November as well. But no, it's not all just national developers.
Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Here we go.
I commend the city for looking at the zoning code and the mixed selective about where parking can be reduced. I applaud you guys for doing this.
Thank you, thank you. So if anyone is interested, we can, if you want to, we can pull up your property, look at your existing zoning, compare it to your proposed zoning. Is there more questions? There is more questions. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, mine was a comment. I agree with her. We've got to change if we want to grow. And change isn't always comfortable. I'm old. I don't like change. But I'm adjusting. I have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, have to adjust. So I'm commending you guys on all of this work, and it is not easy, but it is necessary if we're going to grow. You can't keep narrowing people down to what they did 20 years ago. It's not going to work. So to grow, we've got to change. So I'm with her. I commend you on what you're doing.
So if there isn't any other questions that any of you have, like I said, we can, just leave this opened up to, if you want to look around at the maps, we can pull your property up as well up here. But like I said, if there's no other questions, I will stay around here, of course. Last meeting, we had a lot more questions, it seemed, so if anything comes to you guys, I will be around until when this meeting ends, all right? And I will provide you, here's my contact information as well, my email address, phone number, but of course, as stated, my business card is in the back along with all of our other information. Feel free to grab a Frisbee or a cup or anything else that we might have in the back for you. And like I said, there will be another meeting for this in April. We will have information out to all of you for that too via email. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Chris, I actually have a question for the audience, if you don't mind sticking around for a few minutes. We really, and a few of us talked about this on the way in, it's really important to us that we reach as many people as possible, as many property owners in the city of Elyria as possible, to educate them about what's coming and also be able to answer any questions. It's really important to us as staff and as a city that we get this right. So we can't do that if we don't have feedback. So I'm curious how people heard about this meeting and what ideas you might have about us communicating that future meeting or any future changes with the broader community.
So the Chronicle Telegram?
I learned about the meeting because of daycare providers. I'm sorry.
Water bill? Water bill? Website?
This was posted on social media.
I guess I really didn't know what to expect coming in. I guess I wanted to hear, in talking with neighbors over the course of time, you hear about whatever regulations go on in Elyria that cause businesses not to come in and open. Whether that's, I mean, I keep hearing it's onerous for certain things, like there's some kind of hurdles that people have to do to bring their business in. So I guess I was kind of, hoping to hear something about that.
I can speak to that a little bit. So I'm an assistant safety service director with the city, but my main focus area is economic development and working with the business community. So I have a lot. I can probably bore you to tears with a lot of thoughts about that. It can be a challenge to get through process when there are changes that have to be made. Zoning is just one of those. So, but it's a very critical one. It's a very important one. So when we look at competing for industrial spaces, for example, a lot of that competition is multi-statewide. So we get a lead, we hear that there is a manufacturing company looking for a building of a certain size or a site of a certain size. If it is not zoned correctly, already it's out. You can't, the site selectors that are looking for a place to locate rule us out immediately. So in a community like Elyria, where we were developed decades ago, that's a real challenge because we don't have that much available space. We're built out very uniquely. The city was developed before zoning code even existed. So there's a lot of challenges with that. And this, in part, will help us to be more accommodating, to be faster, to be able to say, nope, that property you're interested in, it's already zoned correctly for what you want to do. The other thing to consider, and that happens, that happens a lot with even the small business owners. So they find a place that they really like, but the process to go through rezoning is too cumbersome. And there is a cost associated with it. It's relatively small overall, but if you're a small business owner and you're not familiar with what it takes to get a property rezoned or to do some of the building code changes that you might have to do, it's just one more thing that deters business owners. So again, by taking those, by broadening, reducing the number of zones we have and broadening the functions that can happen in there, we're hoping to make it more friendly from the zoning side of things. So you don't have to go to Planning Commission. You don't have to worry about, how do I apply for a rezone? How do I notify my neighbors? Oh, it's got to go through 3 readings of City Council after it goes to, Planning Commission. That adds so much time and effort to things. So we're really hoping that that's going to address that problem on the front end. The other thing we're taking into consideration with this, between the comprehensive plan and the zoning changes, is the comment was made, and I so appreciate it, that we have to change. We have to change. The world is very different, and because of the price of housing, for instance, the trend is going towards more dense development than what a lot of us are familiar with. So making sure the zoning code accommodates for that more dense growth, more dense, smaller footprints for homes. I mean, how home prices are absolutely outrageous. Allowing for that smaller footprint, more packed density, is going to help us offer more housing options to more people, and a variety of people, a more diverse community. Also the trend is for walkable communities, young families, young couples, singles. They want to be somewhere where they don't have to drive all the time, where they can walk out their front door and they can grab a coffee or go to a yoga class or get their dog groomed. So that's really why we take a look at those things like corridor and broadening the uses to take the impediment and the process out of it on the front end. So I think that's, I spoke a lot, so hopefully that answered your question, at least as it pertains to zoning. So there's definitely other issues that we have because we have an older building stock, and they have to be brought up to modern code, which can be a complex process. So a lot of it is just our age and the way we were developed, and that factor that the world has changed a lot and we've got to change with it. So we're doing our best to streamline processes, to make it as clear as possible on the front end and add as much support as we can. So I have some business cards, I will share them. So if you have people talking about they're trying to do business in the city of Elyria and it's a challenge, I'd love to talk to them and help them with that. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned Airbnb. I mean, what's...
So we don't have anything definite yet on that, but we want to consider, as many neighboring communities have in recent years, Airbnbs to be allowed within the residential zoning districts. So that is something that is that will be a part of this, but we will need to wait for the update to this current draft that we have right now. I can't speak to that right now. And I think going off of what Dawn said too, I think just the word to summarize all of the great information she provided is we just want to be more user-friendly at the end of the day. We want to have people not have to go through the process of planning commission and everything else. So we just want to be user-friendly and make this process a little easier for not only people to go through if they need to, but to understand as well, and make our work make it more transparent with all of you so you can have a better understanding.
So if we have residential downtown, would you want to see Airbnbs downtown? Yeah. And that's why we're here, is to get that kind of information from you to let us know what is the community interested in doing so we can tailor the code that way. It's our city.
Is there anything else that anyone can think of that they would like to see within the city's, proposed zoning districts here that we may have not touched on, that may not be in the documents? Anything that you can think of that outside of breweries, Airbnbs, solar, wind farms, some of the things we did discuss. Is there anything else that you can think of?
He's dying to show off his map, so somebody give him a property to look up, okay? Any property, it doesn't have to be your property. If you're curious
We
about,
do have some
hey,
good
what's
maps.
happening in this area, give him
That is actually permitted in our current code, but there is a moratorium currently. So, I mean, that will be permitted, but there is a moratorium currently.
And thank you. I just wondered if you know what's happening with the Illyria Mall yet. Do we have any clue on what's happening?
I can answer that question. So the Lorraine County Port Authority owns the mall, and they are working through negotiations with the purchaser for that. But the intent is for it to be a business park, so it would be most likely light industrial, a combination of light industrial and commercial uses. And the goal there is to obviously add jobs, but also to have enough daytime population at that location that it will help spur additional business growth and surrounding the mall property itself. Chickens. People want to know about chickens. Yeah. I'll tell you a fun fact that we learned this week, if you're interested. We were going through some of the legal changes that we needed to make, just as a point of evidence for how antiquated our zoning code legislation is. We found code that needs to be updated for if you have a jukebox. If you have a jukebox in your location, it needs to go to the zoning administrator for approval, and also to the chief of police to make sure you are of good moral character to have a jukebox in your commercial establishment. So that's just to show you how much we need to tweak these codes.
I think during the last meeting, there were a lot more people that had individual situations that they'd already run into, so they're curious about things like parking, things about what type of uses are going to be allowed in this area. And we did pull up properties, so he got his map ready this time, so you could pull up any property and it'll tell you exactly what the uses are. But I think that with the last meeting, it was a lot more specific individuals. You know, and part of the reason why we came up with the need to do a zoning code update is because we run into situations every day. You get an application that comes in, it raises questions, you know, the staff spins their wheels trying to figure out, well, what does this mean, or how does this fit now? This isn't defined anywhere. So everybody's been taking notes. Daryl's got his book here with all kinds of yellow stickies from all the notes. Every time he goes through some application, he's like, got to put another note in there, right? These are all things that need to be changed, and so now we're doing this overhaul, and hopefully we get a lot of those addressed to make it easier. So when you look at it and it's clear to you, what can I do, what can't I do? It's actually modernized, and hopefully you'll have more flexibility in uses in each area.
So what was the deal with chickens? Like, people want to have chickens? Is that it?
People want chickens, and especially because eggs are so expensive, they want some chickens, and they want a lot of chickens. So,
Okay.
are you allowed to have roosters? I actually don't know what the existing
A
is.
lot of communities, they don't allow, it's just chickens usually, from my experience. I can't say to every community, but it is something that we're looking into with this moving forward.
this river that goes through, and it seems like it's so closed off through so many parts of the city. You know, to have, you know, a restaurant or something that can overlook the river, or, you know, with a dining area outside or whatever, but patio. But just I don't know. I just wondered, or is there anything planned for Uncle Vic's area where all that burned down and replace it with something that looks nice? You know?
I can answer that question too. That is very challenging because many of the properties are owned privately. And we, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which, what perspective you have, we can't force somebody to do something with their property that they don't want to do. So for the city to act as a developer of a riverfront property would be a challenge just for that reason, acquiring the properties and making that happen. Although it is definitely one of the assets we have specifically in downtown. So we do have some public parks that we are factoring into how to leverage those to encourage more development around there, how to market that, quite frankly, as an asset for people outside of Elyria to come and see Elyria. Grants are, we have a few grants. A lot of the incentives for development like that are dependent on the project size. Improvements to the property tax collection, a lot of our incentives are, by state law, are tied to property tax improvements. We do have some grants specific to downtown, and one is for facade improvements. Another one is for historic rehabilitation. So if you're taking a building that is kind of obsolete and you're trying to use it in a new way, or do major renovations, we have a grant for that. And the one that I think is the most intriguing that is newer, we put it into place last year, is what we call an architectural design grant. And that is specific to downtown, but also along Cleveland Street between 57 and Gulf Road. And that is reimbursable for architectural services. So we have a lot of small businesses, a lot of people interested in opening a small business, and one of the barriers to entry is the cost for design services that are required to meet the building code standards. So it's not exactly zoning, but it is something that is helpful for those small businesses coming in. That is out-of-pocket money. That is cash up front before you can invest in a property or you start your business to get those architectural designs. So we did create a grant for that, and we're seeing a lot of success. So it's pretty novel. I don't know any other communities like Elyria doing that, but we have seen it where we've been able to contact some of the building owners where they have empty storefronts and say, hey, did you know that we have this? We'll pay for these designs. Of course, it requires approval by our committee, but it's allowed us to position ourselves in a way where that return on investment increases, and it has encouraged people to take that property in their portfolio and prioritize it for redevelopment. So we have one grant underway right now on Middle Avenue for a first floor. It'll be a quick service restaurant, and we have a couple of others in the pipeline that we expect to come through and get approval for that. So that's our first step.
Yeah, there are incentives. We do try to incentivize development in different areas, and there you could create incentive districts. It's not part of our zoning process, but the city is also looking at re-examining, and I think Ashley could probably talk to, you got community reinvestment areas, you've got incentive districts, you've got joint economic development districts. There are a lot of tools that we can use through community development to try to focus and give incentives to develop certain areas.
Yes,
so there are multiple tax abatement programs, depending on eligible for improvements. That's another potential incentive. And then we can also pair some of these incentives together. Some of the downtown economic development programs, they can use the architectural design program and then also apply for the downtown historic rehabilitation grant. So you really can, that's what Director Calvert's, expertise is in, and with the assistance of the department, is to work with these businesses to try and give them the most bang for their buck, essentially.
The other thing I'll add on to that is we're a small piece of a larger network for economic development. So we have regional partners, we have state partners, and it might not always be a grant, but it could be a low-cost loan, or there's other programs that we do bring to bear to try and help businesses of all sizes in the city be successful and help solve problems and encourage reinvestment and job creation at their location. So as an example, we had a long-term 100-year industrial tenant who had a building that was collapsing, for lack of a better word. They're private equity owned. They had challenges because this wasn't going to add anything to the bottom line. It was a maintenance problem, but it was also constricting them on their property to have this building that they couldn't use, which meant they wouldn't be able to, take that space and use it for anything productive for their business. And we were able to help them get a grant for that. So we do help with that quite a bit. Helping. It wasn't the city's funds. It was through a county partner, but we were able to help make that happen. And the goal is to clean up that property, get it compliant, but also free up space for them to eventually reinvest right there on that site with the hope of retaining them here in the city for a long time to come, but also add jobs in the future.
Are there any other questions?
I'm going to go back to corridors. I'm sorry. I was just wondering, in the standards, I don't see anything about like crosswalks. It does mention, parking and some other that are applicable for that zone, but it doesn't mention walks or sidewalks in specific and crosswalks. I feel like a lot of our corridor areas are kind of dangerous for pedestrians, and it seems like that part of the code says that it would be encouraging, adequate pedestrian and bicycle connections to and from neighborhoods and parks within the corridor district. So I don't know if that's even something, we're talking about this here. Would that be something to come and talk to Planning Commission, come back to that meeting to ask for specific areas of concern?
Yeah, can you list some areas that you're thinking of that might be of concern?
I live off of South Abbey, so close to Chestnut, and there it gets kind of busy. So in particular, like Carroll Lane right there to cross South Abbey into that neighborhood. Like my family lives on the other side of that neighborhood, and there's a baseball field, so just that intersection right there would be nice if there was a crosswalk, but maybe just a few areas along South Abbey or Abbey Road on North Abbey side too is very busy for that whole, it's considered corridor, so it says that it should be safe for pedestrians, but it just doesn't seem really pedestrian friendly, some of these corridor spaces.
So this area was actually mentioned in our last meeting. One of our council members was here. He agreed with your statement that it shouldn't be, you're talking about specifically this area that I'm looking at right here of South Abbey Road, correct? Chestnut. Yep, yeah, so this area right here, we are reconsidering actually, having spoken with the council member regarding it. This would most likely be residential. I mean, everything that fronts that road has a residential use in there. Yes, and the road is not, I believe is it a 2-lane? I don't have the aerial up right now. Yeah, 2-lane with ditches. So having a corridor there does not make sense. So we have, yes, and actually I got with our consultants and we are, there will be revisions to this map. So I want everyone, I encourage everyone to stay up to date with this process because there will be changes with not only the draft document, but also this map that you see here. And I am going to be working on getting this draft map available online too. So you can do exactly what we can here of search your property and be able to see that as we're moving forward with this process. So you can have that opportunity. But like I said, I will be sending out an email tomorrow. So all of you can reach out about that.
But that's a perfect example of why you have public meetings, right? You are familiar with a certain area and you say, what it looks like up here doesn't make any sense, so why don't you guys consider changing that? And the same thing with the councilman from the last meeting. So that's exactly the type of feedback we're looking for.
I also wanted to mention, I think it was in 2023, might have been early 2024, the city of Elyria adopted an active transportation plan, which looked at pedestrian traffic throughout the city. And it is online on our planning tab. And there's some really good information in it. So you might be interested to take a look at it and see, what the findings were of that and then what the recommended projects were coming out of that. And again, we are always open to feedback. Thank you.
Well, since you got that map up there, how about going a little more east where we have the Walmart area? Okay, go a little more east. Come to the Meadow Lakes development, and I think you're right there. Now you see where Fieldstone Drive is at, and it's on the other side also of the other development. Whose responsibility? Is that the builder's responsibility to finish that road? Well, the reason why I'm asking that is because of all the residents that are in there, there's only one exit in case of some kind of emergency. We have many elderly people, not including me, but that would probably have a difficult time going out of that one small entrance.
So that question, I would refer to the engineering department in terms of the, you're saying this right here is, so we can refer this to the engineering department. I can take your contact information and get you with Mr. Schneider, the city engineer, to reach out to you to discuss that further. Yes, that's the property line. Yeah, it encroaches on there.
I think I pretty much know what whose responsibility it is. Then.
Okay.
Yeah, I will say, unfortunately, I think this was before any of our time up here. I can't say typically it is the developer's responsibility to build the road. And also typically the fire department, as part of the subdivision process, would make comments on to the safety of accessing those roads and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, because see,
yeah.
We do know that the city is responsible for like snow cleanup on that area. So that's why what generated this question was that was going to be completed. Or if it's the developer that has to do it. That was all it was.
Yes, thank you. We'll get you an answer on that.
Are there any other questions, concerns, comments?
So the question was regarding vacant lots in the city. Whatever any vacant lot is, they will have that zoning category associated with it moving forward. So anyone that does wish to develop on that property, they would have to conform to the standards of that zoning category that is, that it would become once this is approved. And of course, it needs to conform to the current requirements from a zoning perspective. In terms of vacant properties within the city, Dawn, would you be able to speak to that? Or Daryl, would you be able to speak to the vacant properties?
Currently, our zoning code governs vacant lots as currently buildable lots of record. Unfortunately, a lot of our lots are either demolished homes, very small footprint, limits the size of home that can be built. A lot of contractors are taking interest in these types of lots and are building them out. If you've been down South Abbey, you've seen a lot of inner lots by Apples, you've seen some lots fill in, and they're located throughout. Our new code most likely will mirror that same premise, that any lot that is a footprint that it falls within the category is buildable. It's just a matter of what size home can you put on that lot.
So like I bought some from the land bank and like so I got it and like they wouldn't even let me put a shed. I had a surveyor survey it, survey my house, come back, add it to my property.
So in terms of our zoning code, what it calls for is a shed or a fence that would be considered an accessory use. You need to have a principal use on the property, which would be a home, a place of business, let's say, depending on the zoning category that it's in. So just having an accessory, that would need a variance in that case. You would have to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals if you wanted to have something like that on your property. But a fence or shed, you need to have a principal use on the property, such as single-family residence or business on that property.
Yeah, I got a house and I bought the lot beside. Put it in the shed.
So if it's a separate property, so you could combine those properties, or then you need a variance, of course, for that because it's on a separate property. So that property does not have even though from my understanding, what you're saying, you have a house, and the property right next door is where you're having the shed, correct? Yeah, so that is because it's a separate property, it only has an accessory on it. You would need to have another residence on that property where the shed is located. Does that make sense? You would need to construct a principal use on that property. You would need to have a single-family house constructed on that property, and then you could have a shed because, let's say, the single family is your principal structure. Yes, yeah. Yes, that's correct. We can take a look if you would like. Yeah. Moving forward, you would still have an industrial zoning classification. If you want to take a copy of what we have here, the draft, so you can see what the proposed uses are. So you can ensure that what you want to do could still be used in that industrial property.
That's what I'm concerned about, because I got my whole life in this. This is a big situation. My money's tied up. I've spent years not to just get it taken out from under me. The zone changes, right?
Understood, understood. Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars we paid over year, so I'm just saying.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. I think, well, that was specific to his property. I think, again, it probably goes without saying, probably doesn't need to be said, but just in case, you know, even if we're going to be rezoning the properties, but people will still be able to petition to rezone their property. Like, that's still an option, similar to how it is today. If we, you know, there's 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we didn't get it right and they want to rezone it, they're still going to have that opportunity to petition to rezone. And there's still the opportunity to request variances through Board of Zoning Appeals or Planning Commission as needed. So those things aren't going away because we're changing the code.
Anytime somebody wants to do something new on a property, you can kind of see what the process is. One of the very first things they'll do is submit a zoning request to the city planner. And he'll go to his map here, and he'll pull it up, and he'll say, okay, how's this zoned? What's your proposed use? What do you want to do with the property? And then he'll look and see how it matches up, and he'll give you an opinion. It says, here's what it says you can do, this is how it fits, and help you work through that process. And that's when you would determine whether or not, do I need to go for a zoning change? Do I need to go for a variance? And hopefully under the new code, be a lot easier because you won't have to go through those extra steps.
I see on the map there where Myers coming in is not part of the city of Elyria.
I'm sorry, you're referring to the property at 57, it's currently in Eaton Township?
Chestnut Ridge and 57?
Chestnut Ridge and 57? Okay, so that's Carlisle and Eaton, yeah. So that's not in the city, so it's not a part of this rezoning. If they were to petition to annex into the city, they would, you know, it would go to the lowest or the highest restriction zoning, and they would have to seek rezoning. So there would be an opportunity, again, with any planning change, there's an opportunity to have your voice and your opinion heard at both Planning Commission and then City Council. So typically, a rezoning request goes to Planning Commission, is heard at Planning Commission, and then it goes through 3 readings at City Council, where public input can be had. You can sign in and request to speak about it. And then, however, sometimes it's pretty rare, but sometimes City Council will waive 3 readings. They usually do at least 2. But, you know, there's an opportunity for public input with every zoning change.
Where exactly are we talking about?
That would be Chestnut Ridge and 57.
this side, right there.
You're saying some of these should be commercial uses? Right here on the corner here? Okay. Try that pole image. This is what we're annexing. So those properties there, we will work and direct our consultant to consider having that as more of a corridor or commercial zoning based on some of the information you provided. So very thankful for you providing that tonight. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's tweaks. We're tweaking it as we move along. So your input, very, very appreciated.
And I think we mentioned it during the presentation, but as a reminder, when we make this change, the properties will be grandfathered. So if you're using it a certain way until that use it's gone 6 months not being used as that, it will remain that zoning. That will be allowed, whatever that use is. So as an example, let's say you have a restaurant, it gets rezoned residential for whatever reason. As long as that continues to be used as a restaurant, it will be allowed, it will be compliant with the zoning. If that use ceases for 6 months, it's no longer compliant and reverts to the new zoning.
When was the last time that was ever enforced?
Zoning code for use of property?
We've tried in the past to have.
I can answer that. The last time we enforced nonconforming was 131 William Street, the old Blue Star. That was recent.
Tried a house in. The question I had was for the historic district. So you have it split now, downtown and a corridor. Wondering why, what the thought of that is, why it's that whole area is it's the same type of residential. I mean, it's an actual district recognized by. That went not used, it would revert back to a home, which is it was a home at one time. Every
most of it has to do with historically how we've considered the downtown area to be, as well as just the geographic proximity to what is going on in this area, the school. You have a lot more compact uses in this area. So that's sort of the thinking behind it. This is not a final map, of course. This is just proposed, but that's just the overall thinking behind it.
We've been seeing the same map and we've made the same comments. Yeah.
I don't understand.
Right where you have your cursor right now, if you go straight across between West and Middle, why is that separate? Same.
West Avenue and we're chopped off. Connected to that rest of that purple area. That's a parking lot, and then I don't know why you would chop off a quarter of a
So what would your thoughts be on, of these zoning classifications that we were proposing here that the, not split, okay. Mm-hmm.
I just know it's very odd.
You just want consistency across the whole board with this, yeah. Okay, I will make note of that indefinitely, and we'll hopefully have a revised map shortly here.
Any other questions, comments, concerns, suggestions?
To touch on the gentleman that was in here and left, I mean, this isn't a zoning thing, but, I mean, what he was touching on was, what is more of a building code, or, I mean, the creeping blight that happens, you know, around Infirmary Road, or, you know, the sidewalks falling apart and all that kind of stuff. I think that's kind of what he was talking about, is places are coming in, it's dirty, it's not picked up. Where does that come in this whole process?
I can speak to that to an extent. We have adopted in the city the 2018 Property Maintenance Code. If you see a concern of junk and debris, trash strewn about, please contact our department. We will dispatch an inspector to investigate. If it is something where it is trash being piled in the right-of-way, we can refer that to the CMG Central Maintenance Garage. They will dispatch their trash disposal unit to come pick it up. If you have a concern on a home that is in poor condition, please contact our office. We will also investigate that, as that is a separate element from zoning. That is more property maintenance enforcement.
Questions, comments, concerns?
All right, thank you everyone for coming out this evening. We appreciate your input. Make sure that you included your name, contact information in the back so we can follow up with all of you. Stay tuned to all social media sites with the city, Chronicle Telegram, and please take business cards that we have located in the back of the room too, to reach out to any of us if you have any questions moving forward. Thank you again.